One of the cloaked men screamed, "Master," as the blast resolved into a shadowy, purple-flecked silhouette that rose from the impact. Surprise and alarm replaced the attacker's bravado. For a moment, the balance of power hung uncertain as the emergent figure steadied itself, and everyone awaited what it would do next. After the silhouette had steadied itself in the alley, the figure made its identity clear. It proclaimed, in a feral voice, that little Nine had woken and was here to eat. The young, desperate ally nearby burst into manic gratitude and addressed their master, gleefully announcing that little Nine was starving and urging it on. Without hesitation, the creature obeyed. A blade of violet and magenta energy lanced from the shadowy form, carving a bright, concussive path through the cramped space. The beam slammed into one of the attackers with bone-jarring force. Rock and dust exploded outward, and a raw, anguished cry escaped the struck man as blood and light sprayed the ground. Where bravado had moments before ruled, only alarm and staggering shock remained, the attacker's plans abruptly undone by the emergent entity's sudden, brutal hunger. A blade of violet and magenta energy erupted from the shadowed form, and little Nine attacked with lethal speed, cleaving across the narrow alley. The beam slammed into one of the assailants, turning bravado into blood and blowing rock and dust outward as the young woman pressed herself against the wall in terror. The creature's ally had promised that the life jade protector would be good nutrition for little Nine, and the declaration preceded the strike that shattered the attacker's formation. Debris rained down and the ground bucked beneath the force of impact. A protective barrier that had guarded them fractured with a jagged groan. The tall, cloaked man reeled in stunned disbelief at what he had unleashed, while his shocked comrades staggered, and one let out a raw, anguished scream as the failed shield left them exposed. In an instant, the attacker's plan collapsed into chaos, and the alley fell under little Nine's ruthless appetite. Little Nine's violet and magenta blade had torn through the cramped alley, smashing the makeshift barrier and splintering the attacker's formation. Debris rained as their confident advance collapsed into disorder. Amid the dust, one of the cloaked assailants, eyes wild, faltered in disbelief and spat out that the Zyro family's jade was supposed to be secure, his certainty broken by the sudden carnage. A hulking, shadowed maw surged through the breach, its purple energy carving the ground and driving a woman to the pavement, blood and grit on her face. Over the chaos, a single thought seemed to hang in the air, invincible, as a dark-haired figure, bathed in cold purple light, emerged in a close-up frame, expression unreadable and power coiling at his back. The scene closed on the aftermath of little Nine's strike and the slow, tense promise of another force about to intervene. The alley had still been choking on dust when the last shockwave subsided. Little Nine's violet and magenta arc had shredded the assailant's formation and sent debris skittering across stone. From the gouge in the pavement, a jagged purple shard pulsed and sunk, smoke curling from its tip as a tall, cloaked figure strode through the haze and summoned it home. He issued a single, cool command for little Nine to return, and the sentient form snapped back into place upon his shoulder with a chittering, triumphant cry. The man, wrapped in shadow and purple light, mocked the reputation of the Zyro family as nothing more than a bother, while a small, devoted companion gushed thanks and praise to her master for the victory. At the edge of the ruined courtyard, a bystander, still trembling from the violence, thought only that the man was far too terrifying, an uneasy silence settling now that one dangerous force had withdrawn and another, inscrutable presence remained. Dust and splintered stone still hung thinly in the air after little Nine had been snapped back to the cloaked leader's shoulder, and the ragged fight collapsed into silence. The leader's contempt for the Zyro family lingered like a cold echo through the ruined courtyard. A young man, eyes flaring red, brooded over a dangerous truth he had uncovered and feared the price of knowing it, whether the cloaked figure would simply end him to keep the secret. He checked himself with a terse, inward note, then found his attention drawn downward. A disoriented woman knelt on the ground, wide-eyed and breathless, barely steady as she whispered that he was still there. The moment between them was taut with unspoken threats and fragile relief, the square heavy with watching survivors and the unanswered motive of the cloaked leader. The final frame snapped the atmosphere into an almost absurd aside. replacing the fragile intimacy with an extravagant, unrelated image and overt promotional text that fractured the scene's weight.